I will pass it.
Somebody has their hand raised. Is there a question? Yeah, Miriam.
On the iPad, the chat and everything is in the upper right-hand corner.
Thank you. That's helpful to know.
Yep.
Ready?
I think so.
Okay. Can we just take a moment and acknowledge all of the humans that are here and see all the faces? Thank you for being here and supporting us. Can you hear us? Okay. Yeah, just nothing but love, right? Okay, don't cry.
You're wonderful.
I know, love you all. Thank you for being here. So I do have a slideshow and I'm going to present parts of it. And sometimes we're just going to be speaking and we're going to get you access. Lindley and Lily, maybe this is a question. Lindley, can we just email it to them? How can we get them access afterwards? Yeah, just email it to you.
We can share the email list, and I would just say maybe if you don't want your email shared, send me or Lily a private chat to let us know that, and then we won't share your email. But if we don't hear from you, assume that we will share your email with Cass and she will share the slideshow with you.
And it's full of links and interactive in a lot of ways. So I want to give you access so that when you are thinking about it later and you want to explore some of the features and some of the data and resources that are in the slideshow, you're free to do that. So
Without further ado,
let's do it, kid. This one, right?
yeah.
Can we see it? Okay, here we are. How's that? Is that a good view? Okay, great. First thing I invite you to do is to check out your name and how you show up in this meeting. And it's attached to your picture, right? And originally when I was doing this process to make this particular slide, it was down in the bottom left-hand corner where my name showed up. But I also know that you have 3 dots in the visual of your photo. And if you click on the 3 dots, a drop-down menu shows up, and on the bottom it says, what does it say? Rename. And so I invite you to use the name that you would like to be recognized as. And if you're comfortable, to use your pronouns. Bea and I talked a bit about this last night, about the importance of pronouns to them, which is just to normalize the conversation of
Yeah,
talking about it.
a lot of trans people feel like uncomfortable with their pronouns, and so normalizing, like asking, it's better to know than to assume this kind of thing. You don't want to like accidentally offend anyone or anything, so it just helps with that.
And also I want to leave room and space for folks that maybe aren't comfortable in the space because it's maybe a bunch of strangers, or perhaps you're unsure and you don't know where you fit and you don't have something that you identify with or prefer. So it's perfectly acceptable if you don't choose to put your pronouns. And also we invite you to do that. Yeah. So for an opening, yeah, we have a poll everywhere link that I'm going to put in the chat. Lindley, will you put that in the chat? So using the link that Lindley's putting in the chat.
It's going to take a minute, but we'll get there.
Yeah, or you can text my name, Cass Bath 907 to the number 37607 if you have a device. And then it will, you will respond to the question. Oops, hold on, hold pause, hold that thought. Too much is happening. Wait. How do I get out of that? Oh, no. Okay, pause. Okay. The question that should show up.
Cass, mine isn't linking to what
Okay.
you have.
Like through text, mine was being weird too.
Okay, yeah, hold on. Thank you for your patience, everybody. Okay.
See if this works. Did that do it? Yay.
Did that do it?
So you should have the link in the chat now.
Great, thank you.
901, that's why. It's
Yeah.
901.
So it's CASPAD 901. So answer the question, which is give a one-word answer that describes your emotion going into this conversation. You might say anxious, excited, proud, apprehensive. You can answer more than once, but please only use one-word answers. And certainly if you see something that resonates for you and you're like, yeah, I'm feeling that too, then you can certainly add more.
Where do I go again? I signed on a little late. I apologize.
I can put the link back in the chat. If you signed in after I put it in, you wouldn't see it.
Okay, thank
There
you.
it is.
And I'm going to present again so that we can see.
Oh, it went away too quick for me to do it.
Are you
I'm on
Ava-
my phone, unfortunately.
able to go back to chat? There should be a function where you can open the chat on your phone.
Okay, thank you.
Cass, are we allowed to put more than one?
Yes, certainly if somebody says something that resonates with you and you're like, yeah, I'm feeling that too, then for sure, you can answer more than once. However, whatever emotions you're feeling right now, going into this conversation, one word answers. And it doesn't account for spelling. So if you see an exited there, we might assume that it should be excited. You just need to text.
I did. Oh, text me.
So we'll just give it a few minutes to generate. This is all super positive and just such a reflection of what I was saying at the beginning of all the love and gratitude for all of you that are here. Good for you to see too. Yeah, scared. I was totally wondering if there would be some apprehension or even some like skepticism about going into this. Yeah. I think that these are really vulnerable conversations to have, whether you're like in it as a family or whether you're just out in public, knowing that this is going around you and wanting to make sure that you approach it respectfully and not offend people. And that's nerve-wracking, right? This is beautiful. It looks like it's settled a bit. So I will stop sharing for a moment and let's do introductions, shall we? So I will start. That's a lie. Let's go through the agenda. I'm sorry. Just so you have a feeling of what the sequence of this presentation is going to be about. Here's a timeline. First, we'll do introductions of each other, and then we're going to break it into a couple sort of lessons. So the first lesson, we are going to use a visual called the gender unicorn, and then offer space for clarifying questions. And then we're going to do breakout rooms, groups of 3 or 4, to let you have space and time and small groups to sort of process the gender unicorn with each other and ask questions and point out something that was significant to you. And then we'll come back to the main room and just have a 5 to 7 minute intermission, just so we can take a break and stretch and take care of our needs. And then the second half will be a second lesson, sort of addressing how the gender conversation is showing up out in the world using different sources, and then specifically how language has changed to accommodate the conversation that's happening in the world. And then we'll do a pronoun grammar activity. And then we are intending to leave 20-25 minutes at the end for questions. And we are open to all kinds of questions, right? Okay. So my introduction, my name is Cass Bath. I come from this perspective as mom. Bryce is my kid. And also I did my undergrad degree in women's studies and math. So I feel like I've been a part of the gender conversation for a while in like the academic space, and I'm pretty nerdy. So I'm interested in like culturally what's happening out in the world. I love statistics and math and scientific evidence and discovery. So that's my lens. Having a kid that has taught me a whole other level is super profound. My why am I doing this class? I am going to present this piece because statistically, LGBTQ youth, particularly trans youth, and trans, just so you know, and again, you'll see this a bunch, but trans is defined as anybody whose gender in their brain, in their identity, doesn't necessarily match the sex that they were assigned at birth. So trans youth have an astronomically higher rate of suicide, violence against them, and self-harm, yeah, right? So in my mind, part of how we're going to do this is we're going to just have conversations with each other in the hopes that you all see how we interact when we talk about this stuff, right? And certainly you're going to tell me if I'm just telling me to stop. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, in my mind, when Bryce first came out to me and asked to use they, them pronouns, my gut was like, oh, how do I react? What do I do? How do I react? What do I do? And worried about, honestly, this statistic about suicide and self-harm and violence against trans youth was the first thing that came to mind, that I'm nervous for my kid and I want to keep them safe. And I know that it is a national health crisis that we should be paying attention to. So whether you agree or disagree, this presentation is not about opinions. It's really about having a baseline of understanding of vocabulary and yeah, and the more we know, the more hopefully that you can have an acceptance and understanding, so that the adults can keep having our debates if we want to about whether or not morally we agree with these conversations, but we have the facts and the vocabulary to do that respectfully. And in the meantime, hope that those conversations and that education helps us navigate the conversation with our youth to drop those statistics. I'm trying to share my screen so I can show you. No, that's definitely not it. That's wrong. Don't mind all of that. Get bigger. Okay. No, no, that's also not it. Stop share. How about that? We'll do that. Thank you. There it is. Okay. This graph, when you get the slideshow, has links to it, and it comes from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And in this subsample of youth, I believe it came from the Youth Risk Survey, identifies rates of suicidal behavior. And these are the different categories based on gender: female, male, transgender. This says male to female. This is transgender female to male. This says transgender neither male or female. And this says questioning. So the suicide rates among our youth is clearly way higher for folks that identify as trans versus those that do not. Okay, Bryce, do you want to do your introduction?
Yeah. I think you should keep. So yeah, I was raised like as a girl, and for most of my life, I thought I was a girl up until COVID hit, and I realized it wasn't quite right. It didn't quite fit, and I started doing research. And I realized like there's a lot more out there than just society's binary of boy and girl. And I don't have to fit into any label I don't want to. That's okay. And then I also learned that a lot of society's like transphobia and all that is rooted in, like, not always in hate, but in just not being educated on this. So I think it is really important to educate people without judgment, and a lot of people just don't know how to ask the questions without sounding like offensive or whatever, and they're worried. That's one of their biggest concerns. But my goal is to encourage people to ask all sorts of questions without fear of that judgment. And I consider myself pretty good at getting to the root of the question and answering what they mean to the best of my abilities without like being offended by the questions, because I know like they just don't know how to ask. And so like if it is a potentially offensive question, I'll just like, hey, we say this instead, but also here's your answer.
I think you mean this, let me.
Yeah.
Mhm. Great, thank you. I just want to present sort of the norms and expectations of this class, because one of the things we talked about, both Lindley and I and Bryce and I, was that it's a vulnerable thing to put ourselves in this position. And we want to make sure that Bryce and any other youth that showed up today felt safe, right? And so some norms that I'm used to using in my professional life are on the left. The first one is show up, or another way to put that is choose to be present. And I think online that offers that looks differently, right? So like maybe don't check your email while you're doing this. And I understand if you don't want to show your face, right? That's okay. And when you're here physically, we hope that you're here and part of the conversation emotionally also. Pay attention to heart and meaning. I think this speaks to what Bryce was just saying. We're going to get it wrong, and I get it wrong every day, all day, and it's okay. And Bryce trusts my heart and meaning. And
You don't mean any harm.
right.
So,
Yeah. And so we ask that you keep that in mind when other folks are talking too. Tell the truth without blame or judgment, and speak your truth. Be open to outcome, be open to the idea that your mind might change, and you're here to listen and learn, and that's a big piece. But there's also this expectation that I'm really here to keep my kids safe. And Lindley and I talked about how that might happen and what we might need to do. One is we can just flat out refuse any question, right? So we're open to pretty much everything, so ask. And also we absolutely have the right to just say, sorry, that's not an appropriate question, we're not going to answer it. And if you want to get a heads up, even Lindley, I'm going to throw you into this. I hope it's appropriate, but Lindley was describing in the chat, you can specifically direct questions to her. And so if you want to float a question by her, just to be like, hey, does this sound like an appropriate question? I'm sure she would take those before, if you need a little confidence boost before you say it out loud.
Or you can private message it to us and I can like run it through.
Yeah.
So.
And we have the right and responsibility, again, to keep kids safe. So Lindley can kick anybody out if it gets to that point. And I don't expect it will. And we at the middle school do restorative practices and restorative circles. And in the breakout room, I wanted to hold some rules, some expectations of that interaction between the three or four of you that enter each breakout room. The idea behind circles is to have everybody have a voice and everybody be able to participate. And so here are sort of the foundational guidelines that we use. One is to speak in a talking order. And so that means when somebody can volunteer to go first, and then when you've said your piece, call out somebody else's name, and hopefully you guys have changed your name so that we know how to address you in this group. And then that person will say their piece, and then they can send it over to the next person, and so on and so forth. And then if you have a chance to speak again, try to recall or remember and follow that same speaking order so that everybody in theory gets the same amount of turns to speak. And in that vein, say just enough, which means monitor your speaking time. And you want to get your point across, but you don't want to take up all the space in the room and be the only one speaking. Respect confidentiality. Certainly if personal things come up in this space or conversations about, I think especially about people's own gender identity, having it in this room, in this space might feel different than out in public, right?
However, personally, I will say I encourage people to use my own experience like as examples in their own day-to-day life if they feel necessary.
So you're giving everybody permission to speak about what you say in this room out in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, thanks. Yeah. Also, I just want to say that Bryce and I have decided, because I'm super nerdy and a teacher by profession, I'm more comfortable in this setting, and Bryce is just going to interject whenever and all the time. And please know that you can pass. And in the context of Zoom, if you are uncomfortable in the small breakout group, you can leave the room. And Lindley will discuss some of the breakout stuff when we get to it. And so if you're not comfortable participating, you can either pass. So if you want to stay, but you're not comfortable sharing, that's fine. Or just exit the room. Yeah. Okay, those are my big questions. My big my big rules.
Norms and expectations.
Thanks, kid. Okay, so the first thing we're going to jump into is this gender unicorn. And Lindley, could you put that in the chat as well?
Which part? The link to it?
The link to the gender unicorn, yeah.
You got it.
Cass, do you mind putting it full screen? I think it'd be easier for people to see their slideshow if you're able to do it full screen.
Yeah, for sure. Except right
Thank
now,
you.
yes. Okay. So this is the gender unicorn. And it was developed by the Trans Student Educational Resources as a way for people to distinguish between some of the terminology that's out there right now. And it was interesting because, again, from my perspective in the education world and academics, I love this thing because I think it's a good way to describe some of the stuff we're talking about. And I recognize it's flawed. And when I showed it to B, what was your reaction?
I still don't fully understand the gender unicorn. Like, I get its point and its purpose is to help people distinguish between different things, but I also feel like for example, the arrows are one way And that implies like gender can only be this onward, which is totally not true. And so like that's just one example.
Yeah. So all this to
flaws.
say, we recognize that this is flawed. It's a flawed visual. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
It's mostly just to help people distinguish between things.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
So I'm just going to walk through it with you. And if you have a printer accessible to you and you want to print this out and have it with you, you are going to be using this sheet in the breakout room. So having it open, a tab open, is also totally acceptable. And you might want a piece of paper with you and a writing utensil as I'm going through this, so you can sort of jot down anything that jumps out at you. So this is the gender unicorn. The rainbow is talking about gender identity, and you'll notice that that shows up as like a thought bubble for the unicorn. And it's really about, and I'm going to scroll down so you can see down here, there's more definition for all the symbols, if that's helpful. Gender identity really is an internal process. It's how you feel and view yourself, right? And typically, or what's ingrained in society right now, is that there are two options, male or female. What I like about the gender unicorn, and I don't know if you looked up the gender yeah, that there is this option for other. And in theory, you can put your dot on any one of these scales to decide in your brain or identify in your brain where you feel like you fit best. But it really is a personal, internal process. So that's the thought bubble. The green dot, and you'll see it outlines the whole figure, is gender expression, which is about how you present yourself in the world.
How you want, how you present yourself, how you want the world to perceive you.
Give some examples.
Like my eyeliner, for example, I wear eyeliner all the time. I wear it right now. Makeup in general is typically seen as like females only, but that is not true. It's literally just makeup. It does not have a gender, and I just wear it because I like it. However, again, painting your nails is not gendered. However, my brain tells me that I cannot paint my nails because it just feels icky and wrong and gross.
Doesn't fit what you want people to perceive of you in the world. Yeah. So it's the whole body. So it might pertain to how you wear your hair. It might pertain to what clothes you wear. And it's an external thing. This little chromosome genetic strand,
DNA strand.
thank you, words. And you'll see that it shows up in the genital region, is really talking about sex assigned at birth. And that is a combination of biology and hormones and anatomy and chromosomes, right? And again, historically, what's ingrained in our current society too is that there are only two options, female and male. And that's also not necessarily true. And for example, intersexed is a combination or multiple, and there are actually many variations. I just also want to discuss that there's a key. I love the way that this is phrased. This distinguishes sex assigned at birth versus just the word sex, because really when a baby's born, the doctors, or even in your utero, the doctors look at all the parts, right, and are like, that's a boy or a girl, and the doctor assigns that to this little human, and oftentimes they get it right because it is based on anatomy and chromosomes and hormones, and sometimes they totally get it wrong, but it is a human that is assigning that to a baby.
And I don't like it personally. It's like, it's a baby. Why should it, like, a lot of parents of intersex people will choose to have their baby like surgically altered to fit whatever gender they want for a child. And I feel like that is really unfair to the child. And I don't know, I just don't like it.
Do you have anything to say about like, so my mom brain wonders, what if I don't choose a sex, if I have an intersex baby, and then how do I raise this kid out in the world so that they are not
Just
bullied?
raise the kid however the kid feels comfortable. Let the kid wear whatever they want to wear, act however they want to act, play with whatever they want to play with, dolls or trucks, whatever. And yeah, I'm not, yeah, cool, thanks. Just let them do what they want to do.
And then the two hearts, one is orange and one is red, and those are in the heart region of this unicorn. Orange is who you are physically attracted to and or physically or sexually attracted to, and red is who you are emotionally attracted to or romantically attracted to, if at all. And I just want to clarify that today for Bryce, in this conversation, we are mostly talking about the top two, gender identity and gender expression. And just to distinguish that there's a difference between that conversation and sexuality, so who you're attracted to romantically or physically, and sex in a biological way, right? In a chromosome, hormonal, physical way. That's a different conversation. So this is the gender unicorn. I would like to first open up for clarifying questions about the gender unicorn and what we just talked about. Jean, you're muted.
I look at the arrows and all of these, and in some cases I may feel a little bit or a lot on one arrow, and a little bit or some on another. So I might want to say on a scale of 1 to 10 from one end to the other, claim or identify myself as an 8 here and a 3 there or something. Is that a valid use or a helpful use of this scale?
Yeah, certainly. I think that you can place yourself wherever feels comfortable in any combination of those different categories. Yeah, for sure.
And so your question, if yeah, back to you. Sorry, Jean. Yeah, I would say just use the gender unicorn however you see fit to fit your own personal identity. And so whatever that might look like. And Patricia, your question, if your child is intersex and you let them choose how to be, what pronoun would you use with them? The pronoun you would use is whatever the child decides.
What about when they're a baby and they can't decide yet? Good question.
Yeah, this is always a hard one, and I'm never really sure.
We're going to talk about pronouns a little bit later, and so I'm curious if that helps answer. There's options, which is a little
there's a lot
uncomfortable for people, I think, right? Yeah, there's more common ones than others that you'll see. We'll definitely get into the pronoun conversation later. Great question.
And
any other questions?
Yeah, Jacoby and Babo.
Oh, Jacoby and Babo.
What is your question?
You're muted.
Oh. It was more of an observation that it appears like, well, and obviously the expression is completely outside of that unicorn.
Yes.
And that may be obvious or not, but
yeah.
it's good to realize that the identity, the physical, the emotional, that's all, the sex, that's all part of the being, but the expression is absent from the physical being. That's a good point.
That's a really good point.
Well,
and I'm really glad you brought that up. I agree.
Jacoby.
Naming, that's always a difficult one too, because parents a lot of the time want different names that like might have a sentimental value to them. personally, my own previous dead name was, I felt really feminine. And I was lucky enough that my middle name, Bryce, was not. And so I could just choose my middle name. However, that is not always the case for people. And this is, again, a difficult
There's gray area.
Yeah, there's a
Mhm.
lot of gray area
Mhm.
for this kind of thing.
I think naming is one of the hardest things you can do as a parent anyway. Like, and agreeing with your partner, or just even like settling on something on yourself, right? And we waited actually until Bryce was born to give them their given name. And yeah, that's a hard question. I think that it's appropriate for parents to give their child a name. And it might be gendered in the sense that society views it as more feminine or more masculine. And also, I personally didn't have a huge attachment to Bryce's dead name, that when they came to me and said they wanted to use Bryce, I was psyched because I love it. And also, it was a given name. It was a middle name. So I felt like it honored what I gave them already.
Yeah, the name Bryce was super important to me. I had a lot of reasons for choosing it. A lot of it was because it is my middle name, and I feel like I can still sort of honor the name given to me and like my parents and all that, but while also being true to myself and knowing that Bryce is a much more accurate representation of who I am than my dead name. And I don't know, it's really important.
I recognize as parents that that's some internal work that we have to do to like drop the attachment, I think, to that piece. And that's sometimes difficult for people, and okay. So it's okay to like be sad or disappointed, and also
like grieve the loss sort of the child that once was, but also know that like it's the same kid, it's still your child. Nothing really changed a whole lot. I know with you it took a bit to process when I came out to you. You were not expecting it. And yeah, I don't know what that must have felt like in your experience, but yeah, it's okay to feel whatever emotions you might feel. Just to process.
But because I have this kid, it doesn't want to do that. Yeah. Okay, so that's clarifying questions. I'm going to wrap up so we can move on. We're going to move into breakout groups. So let me first, Nima just wrote us a note. She said, an infant or young child probably won't have a preference. When the child's old enough to understand the options, makes a choice, then you can have a discussion.
I do agree with that. That was a direct message. So I do agree with that for the most part. However, transgenderness has been found, like the psychological part of it has been found in children up to like 3 years old, as young as 3. So yeah, it can be any time, but yes, I agree. An infant or young child probably will not have a preference.
So breakout rooms.
We should post them.
Yeah, let me present this and post that.
Are you ready for me to take over, Cass?
Almost. Let me just explain what I'd like them to do with that gender unicorn. So I would like you to identify something about the gender unicorn that stuck out to you, that was impactful in some way. Maybe you learned something new, maybe it was particularly helpful, maybe there's something you still don't quite understand, or something that you absolutely disagree with, etc. Right? And so when you go in these breakout rooms, using the circle protocol that I spoke about earlier, if you could say your name and then describe or present the piece of the gender unicorn that you would like to discuss, and take 2 or 3 minutes to describe that piece, and then move to the next person. And so if there are a few of you in the room. That should take about 8 to 10 minutes for all of you to say your piece. And then you'll have 5 to 7 minutes to discuss, so you can respond to each other or ask questions of each other. And in theory, that whole process will take about 15 minutes. And Lily, it's all you.
Hi, everyone. I'll put you into breakout groups shortly, and just so that you know, if you're not familiar with them, it's Zoom magic that will take care of it all. So Zoom will magically put you into a room with other people. And once you're there, I will send a message just restating what Cass told you about the instructions. If at any point you have questions, there should be an option somewhere at the bottom of your screen that says help, and just press that, and Lindley or I or Cass will come in and help you with any questions that you have. And if you are uncomfortable or need to for any reason, there should also be a button that says back to main room, where you can pop back into the main room as well if you need to for any reason. So I will work on that Zoom magic.
Did you hold us out?
I didn't hold us out. It's just the way that it works. I'm not sure why I put Cass and Bryce in one, but can I put you in a room? Do you want to be in a room?
Sure, I can also stay here.
I can stay here. Amelia, Ella, and Katrina are in a room and could use a fourth.
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay. Hey, Patricia, can I put you in a room?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just keep losing internet here.
No, I'm so sorry. I'll try to put you in a room now if that's okay. Great. Great. Do you want me to put you in a room?
I'm okay either way.
Okay.
If there's a room that needs it, but I don't need to be.
Let's see. Room 1 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Room 2 has 4 people. Room 3 has 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Room 4 has 4 people, and room 5 has 4 people. So you can stay here if you want, or you can just.
No, I'm good here. I am gonna just put mute on and stop my video for a sec.
Great.
Are we not recording? Are you stopping recording for a
Oh,
moment?
hold on.
So this next half is really about how this gender conversation is showing up around the world, culturally and in different settings. Again, you will get this slideshow sent to you, and so you'll have all these links available to you. So this first link is an interactive map of gender diverse cultures, currently recognized and accepted around the world. And it shows all of these little pin marks. And if you click on any one, it comes up with a little blurb about that particular culture and how gender diversity shows up in that culture. And most of them, although admittedly I haven't clicked on every one, come with a link so that you can dive further if you would like to. I think this is a really powerful visual and way to understand that truly, even today, gender diversity is well known and established all over the world. And there is an acceptance in the world that there's more than just male and female. And this map lets you explore that further. So I just wanted you to have that available to you for you to explore later. I also wanted to just make everybody aware that there are recognized, understood, scientifically understood gender diversity in biology, in plants and animals, and specifically this awesome fungus, which apparently has more than 20,000 identified sexes, which is crazy. And again, either on this picture, it brings you to a link that goes into it further. And also this link here brings you to another space that identifies several other animals that have gender diversity well known and established out in the world. Those, again, just to illuminate that there already is an acceptance that there's multiple genders, not just the two that we are accustomed to, that people accept and understand already in the world. Will you shut that door, please? I'm gonna get math nerdy for a minute, so be rude, Bryce. I just want to talk about the concept of binary versus bimodal. So bimodal, let me just talk about nerd stuff for a minute. Mean, median, mode are often used to describe a set of data, right? And mean sometimes is the most familiar, and other people that like non-mathy people might call it the average. Median is the one that shows up in the middle. Mode is the one that shows up most frequently. So I just want to present this idea that perhaps most frequently what shows up are male identified or female identified, but a recognition that there is certainly diversity within that. And so this idea that it's not only just the two options, that sure, those two options might present more frequently than others, but that doesn't eliminate the possibility that there are others. People exist in between and outside of those two options. So that gives to me, in my mathematical brain, that gives me a better visual, a better sense of what we're talking about. So binary means only two options, and bimodal recognizes that there might be a frequency to the two representations and leaves room for in-betweenness. So the reality is we have an understanding that there are multiple genders and experiences in the world, more than just two. And here are some visuals and some vocabulary. Again, I'm not going to go super far into it, although I think Bryce wants to a little. But you can click on each picture and it brings you to a link that lets you see them further and explore that vocabulary more if you would like to. So I just wanted to point them out, that all of the visuals have a link attached to them that you can explore further. I personally struggle a little bit with some of these, and we talk about the fact that there are so many, there's so much, and there is like a bunch of new terminology, right? And every person is different, and what resonates for me might look different than what resonates for me. Do you want to say anything about these two?
Yes, I personally feel like the, oh,
Sorry. How do I go back? Okay, stop that.
feel like the circular, like that Venn diagram type thing does not cover as much as the diamond one. I am a fan of the diamond one. However, my one thing with that is at one point, you guys can see all this, right? I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
I don't understand your computer. I don't know all of these labels, honestly. And so I'm still learning as much as you guys are. But under the Apora gender, it says people who are non-binary can be called NBs. People generally say this because non-binary is often abbreviated with an N and a B, so NB. However, a lot of people feel that to be like sort of babying them and like belittling and almost dehumanizing sometimes even them. And so don't assume that you can call all people who fit under the non-binary umbrella NB. So personally, like some people could call me NB, but I don't want everyone just going around calling me an NB. And technically, I technically fit under the non-binary umbrella, but I don't call myself non-binary in the first place even.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how you, like what do you identify, and maybe also speak about in your mind, you're just one human, but the difference between non-binary and agendered.
Yeah, so I consider myself, I'm still questioning. I have no idea what's going on in my brain. But generally I refer to myself as agender, which is essentially having no gender, genderless, that sort of thing. And so non-binary, a lot of the time people see it as like, it implies the existence of a third gender. So instead of a binary, it would be like a trinary. I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. And so like that kind of defeats the purpose of non-binary and anything that fits under it. I really like the gender diamond. However, I generally think of it as a little differently. To do that, and so like male, female, non-binary, and agender, and anywhere on that spectrum, I think it's a really good way to sort of visualize the spectrum for a lot of it.
Where does gender neutral fit into that vocabulary for you?
I see it as sort of right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think of myself with a gender a lot of the time. Like I do feel something, I just don't know how to place it, where to place it. So I just call myself agender because that's like probably the closest thing I can come to at this point. But I'm not sure, and I think about it constantly. And
Beautiful, thank you. Here's one more visual that I wanted to show.
I also really like this one. It gives a visual of like the umbrella. So cisgender is when you identify with your gender/sex assigned at birth. So cis woman, you are assigned a woman and you identify one, and vice versa. So transgender, yeah, there's that. Trans umbrella is generally, people think of it as a trans woman or a trans man. And so trans man, female to male, or trans woman, male to female. However, non-binary does fit under the transgender umbrella. And so technically I would be trans, however, I do not consider myself trans. And so under the non-binary umbrella is anything that does not fit within society's binary of boy and girl. So gender queer, gender fluid, bigender, and agender. And the little flag under the non-binary umbrella is the gender fluid flag. And then like the colors are the flags of, yeah. So technically I do fit under the non-binary umbrella. However, I don't call myself non-binary necessarily, unless it's to explain like anything that is not within the binary of boy or girl.
You usually say agendered,
Yeah,
right?
I consider myself agender usually.
And this brings up the fact that there are so many variations and understanding of gender and the conversation of gender. And so one thing I think it's important to note is that language changes and evolves. And I think it's appropriate that we have, in a lot of ways, our brains, right, like to categorize because we're taking on so much information. And so to be able to like put something in a nice little box, I get why we've done the male female thing for so long. And I understand that we've had the language that explains that. And also truly, if we are accepting that there are multiple options, not just the two that we have been taught, that what kind of language can we use to help describe all of the different possibilities, right? So one of the biggest hiccups, I think, for people are pronouns. I would say that there are, when I say gender neutral, I mean, because you were describing that that's the middle of the ground,
Generally how I see it, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So gender neutral might be not male, not female. How do I describe myself, or how do I identify somebody or identify myself if I don't feel male or I don't feel female, right? And there are a lot of options. And here they are here. These are not all of them even. And probably the most common.
Yeah, this is some of the common neo-pronouns is what they're called.
Neo-pronouns, N-E-O, neo-pronouns.
And so, like we typically think of pronouns as she, her, he, him, and they, them. However, a lot of people prefer neo-pronouns, and some of those might be it, its, they, them, zir, etc.
And they, them is a common one because it's more relatable or more recognizable, maybe is the better way. It's a common word,
Commonly used
like
anyways.
right, so because we don't use these zeros, thank you, right, in our language typically, but we use they, them, their frequently. So really it's an adjustment in our brains of understanding that when I say they, them, I'm referring to one human and not multiple. And that's hard and an adjustment. Will you talk about how you've helped people remember they, that, in like the pronoun grammar sense, like the swarm of bees?
So a lot of the time people do think of they, them pronouns as being plural. However, it's not always the case. However, if it does help you, you can think of me as multiple people. Like I can be a swarm of bees or 3 tiny dragons stacked up in a trench coat and a tiny little gremlin of a being. And so if that helps you to think of me as plural something, then that's totally fine. Whatever works for you.
Who used they, them pronouns for you first? In our family.
In our family? Dad.
Yeah, just want to throw that out
And
there.
I was shocked, and I did not plan on coming out to him, honestly, at least not for a while. And I did it on accident, and we were arguing. And then I was just like, well, what about me? And then he was shocked, but then I explained it a little more. And then I 100% expected mom to use they, them pronouns for me first. I came out as she, they, and I expected mom to be the first. And like everyone knew it was going to be mom. But then Dad referred to me as they, and it was one of the most amazing feelings in the world, that gender euphoria. It's amazing. It was unexpected and it was super cool. And so it's always really nice when you're surprised by someone, like people using the name Bryce for me and being so adamant about using it, who you don't expect.
Can we also talk about using they, them for people that we don't know their gender? So
Yeah, so it's better to know than to assume. And so like asking someone their pronouns.
and like, what if you see somebody
Great.
walking by?
But if you don't get a chance to ask, and generally use they, them pronouns until you know their actual pronouns, you don't want to assume just based on how they look.
And I think that, again, this is something that we have to grammatically change our mindset on, but it's helpful to, this particular graphic I think is helpful because, like, for example, where I would have said she previously, now I just replace it with they.
I mean, I will say something like the male pronoun is not quite how I would use it.
Fair. So we're going to do some practice, but I also just want to say that in the past, the way that we were taught grammar, if somebody walks by and we didn't quite get a good look at them, we assumed male, and we might have said, hey, that guy just walked down the street, or did you see him walk down the street? When really we have no clue if that was a male, or maybe we didn't get a good look, right? And so to start there, to switch our brains and have an understanding that we actually don't know and we shouldn't assume, and maybe we could say, did you see them, that guy or that human? Not guy.
I personally, it depends on person to person, but generally I found that people use like bro, and
That's totally male to me.
I see bro and guy and dude as totally gender neutral. Unless it is implicitly gendered, I see it as gender neutral. Anyone can call me bro, dude, even man if it's used as slang. However, I don't like it like when people call some like cis or like hey girl, like that's
Doesn't fit
that
well for you.
that feels gendered to me, to my brain. But otherwise, it depends on person to person. But yeah, no, I see bro and dude and guy as totally gender neutral. So I will be the person to be like, hey, did you see that guy? Could be any gender. So
That's so confusing.
yeah, I know.
Okay.
I know. I
So
thought about neopronouns for myself.
what would you use?
Fae, femme, fear.
Really?
For myself, yep, or fair. And
That
so
top one?
that's what I was referring to.
Pronounce those one.
Fae, fair, fear, something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would use if I didn't use neopronouns, because I'm still not entirely sure that they, them fits and is the right set of pronouns for me. However, I also feel like I want society to adjust a little more before I go there.
Interesting.
If I do go there.
Cool. Thanks. So we're going to do a little gender neutral pronoun activity. So I invite you to get a piece of paper and a writing utensil. And I am going to present this list of sentences. And it gives you a subject and asks you to write a grammatically correct sentence using they, them, their pronouns. And this link has a little bit of explanation for different pronouns. And then it has a similar table, which might be useful. And then there are a few pages of exercises. And some of them use some of those more obscure neo-pronouns, but we are just going to focus on they, them, because I find that a lot of folks still struggle grammatically with using they, them, their, theirs as a singular. So again, These are addressing one human, not multiple people. And let's take, I'm looking at the time too. Let's start with 5 minutes of just quiet time for you to write these sentences for yourself. And then we'll check back in. And if you need a few more minutes, that's totally fine. So I'm gonna, if anybody needs a few more minutes, can you type it in the chat? 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? Yeah, we have to look at those later. I didn't see any, but I'm also sharing my screen, so I don't have a full view. Lily or Lindley, can you answer me?
Nope, no
Okay.
chat.
Thank you. So yeah, now I'm gonna stop sharing and let's invite, I invite you all to volunteer if you are feeling brave enough to go through that list. So the first one, any volunteers? Rachel.
So the first one is Trey Andre called their mother.
Thank you, Miss Allen. The second one.
I'll jump in. Angela missed their last appointment.
Same, got that one. The third one. I had Bryce check my work. I know it's like cheating. The third one.
They fell off their bike.
Yeah. The fourth. I had to like scratch this out and start over. Got this one, I think. I was like fumbling with the.
Well, I mean, the wording of the sentence itself was weird.
Yeah.
But you figured out, you got the general grammar part of it.
Thanks.
So.
Anybody?
They couldn't find shoes to fit them.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the fifth one.
I think a lot of us didn't write down the whole sentences, so we're not able to reflect back. Just
Thank you.
from chat and wanting to translate it to you.
Thank you. Yeah, we are done with our portion of the presentation. Again, all of those links you can check on, and that one in particular has multiple pages. So certainly print it out and do it again, or share it with others, or practice the other neo-pronouns. And the last 15 minutes, we want to just leave open for questions for mostly Bryce.
Yeah, I'm probably going to take over this part. So any questions you have, all questions.
Can I interject? Should this part be recorded or not recorded?
Yes, I would like it if it was recorded. I do not care if you guys word it badly or whatever. I will, as I said earlier, I can explain all the stuff, and I'm decent at looking past the words themselves and getting to the meaning of the question. So yeah, don't worry about offending me or anything. You won't.
So Patricia put a question in the chat, which I can read out loud. If there are multiple people in the house, how do you distinguish who you are talking about if you are using they?
Just say their name, typically. Like, yeah, you'll generally know who the person is talking about because of
The context.
yeah, context. And
I would also add that sometimes we find ways to avoid using pronouns. Like sometimes we'll use their name or try to structure the sentence differently in some contexts to like distinguish the difference. And also sometimes I straight up have to ask, like if Henry's referring to Bryce and he's mad and he's like, well, they didn't do the dishes. I'm like, who are you talking about, kid? and then he can clarify.
Any more questions? Because I feel like there's a lot of people who have questions that just aren't speaking, which I get, but.
I'm not remembering the self for they, them, their. Is it themself or their self or both or either or?
Yeah,
How
both
does that go?
depending on context, like they did it themselves or
How do you, so this is a really funny story. Bampa, I'm gonna out you, I'm sorry. So one time, Bampa was like, yeah, but how do you talk about your umbrella, B? Like, if you, do you say?
So I often will use an umbrella as an example, like, oh no, they left their umbrella here, or someone left their umbrella here, if you don't know whose it is and you're using they, them pronouns. So Bampa was like, well, how, if you wanted an umbrella, how would you say that? I want an umbrella. Give me the umbrella.
I is still perfectly acceptable as a pronoun. Ben and Carla have a hand up.
Here we go. Hi, it's me. I was just wondering, Bryce, do you have siblings?
I do have 2 younger brothers. Yep.
So I'm curious about, you said any question is valid. So I'm curious about their reaction and the idea of like how everyone deals with this or
Yeah, so everyone reacted a little differently. Henry is the older of the 2. He is 12. And if I recall, I actually told him before I told Mom, and he was totally cool with it. It did take him a minute to understand they, them pronouns, but he was fine with it. And then Lincoln, the youngest, he turns 4 next week, and he has no idea what a pronoun is. So I don't push it too hard on him. He'll figure it out. I
wonder a little if we're doing him a disservice because we use them so freely and we let him do that. We don't correct him. You know what I mean? Like I'm curious to see as he develops his language, how he will approach the they, them pronoun conversation, because right now he just uses he tells me I'm a he and Henry's a she, and like, because he doesn't quite follow the concept. And also we've talked a lot about like the potential of how he will remember this experience, and probably will only ever know Bryce as Bryce and not necessarily by their previous name. Yeah.
I was also thinking about not just the language, and maybe Cass, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but if there have been kind of emotional experiences with the other children.
Yeah, I would say with the kids, no, I would say except maybe some confusion from Lincoln's standpoint, because he knew them as a different name. And at first he was like frustrated because we kept correcting him. But there wasn't necessarily an attachment yet. And Henry has multiple friends that I would say identify as gender neutral or non-binary. So gender non-conforming, good word, thank you. I would say he's more comfortable with the conversation in general anyway, and he'll straight up go up to people and be like, what pronouns do you use? You know, just in public.
So that's what we're trying to go for, honestly, like
normalizing it.
Yeah. Just like, hey, my name's Bryce and my pronouns are they, them.
I would say between Justin and I, like Bryce explained, we were all a little shocked when he was more comfortable with it than I was at first. And also he had a harder time understanding the vocabulary. I remember in the early days of like having those conversations with him, we were getting frustrated because it was clear he didn't know the difference between biological sex and gender, and the idea of like assigning and culturally assigning these ideas, right? And so getting the education of this language and this foundation of understanding was really helpful. And then once he did, he just flew with it. And we were talking about the ways he interacts with his friends too, because right or wrong, we assumed that that would be difficult for him to like admit or have these conversations with, especially his male friends in Little Bethel, Vermont, especially. And right away, he described them as Bryce and would use they, them pronouns. And I don't know if it was a hesitation or
because I wasn't out to everyone.
yeah, that's fair. Like, so Bryce first came out and said she, they, that they wanted to use she, they pronouns. And so depending on the circle we were in, sometimes they were out, like at home or in family, originally just at our house, not even at like Mima and Vampa's house. So I was having to remember which way to gender them depending on where we were. And I was so paranoid of outing them like at school, like you weren't ready to have the conversation at school yet. So I didn't want to use they, them fluently. So I would then forget when we were in our personal space and then mess up all the time. And honestly, it was almost easier when they came out fully at Christmas time, like to the world, right? Please use they, them, please you start using Bryce. When that switch happened, it was almost easier because I was like, okay, I can do this now. We're committed.
So
one thing I would like to say is, as much as possible, I was trying to avoid using my dead name.
It's fine. So yeah, Mima just put in the chat that there is a loss. Mima is Bryce's grandmother. And this idea of, and we're really good with jokes in our house. And so we didn't find out the gender of Bryce when they were first born. And we had this experience of like, Mima only raised girls. And so Mima was so excited when Bryce came out and was a girl and was like, it's a girl. And then a few months ago, somebody was like, yeah, remember that moment because we didn't know. And Mima was like, we still don't.
That was a good one. That was.
But there is like, for sure there is like this loss of like maybe an attachment to what we thought that they were going to be, but also like a recognition that they probably still can be that and do all those things. And really the gendering of those situations is, my own thing or society's thing, not necessarily what's going to be true for Bryce.
So Cass, you have, Katrina wrote a question in the text or in the chat, and then Patricia, and then Jean. That's your order.
Thank you.
So I can read Katrina's question if that's easiest for you. Bryce, I'm curious about your experience with community or school support. What has been welcome and what have you felt is missing?
So generally the school has been pretty accepting. I can tell most of them do not understand they, them pronouns or just assume that since, hey, I have a new name, that must mean my pronouns are now he, him, which is not true. And so that has happened a few times. People also don't always hear me when I say my name is Bryce and they call me Grace. And this happened like 5 times at least. But yeah, the school has been generally pretty good about it. Teachers have been really good about it. Peers have been pretty good about it. Some exceptions on both ends. But yeah, it's generally been pretty good. There are a few staff members at the school who do not get it and aren't asking or are like afraid of offending me or something, and which is honestly just making it more uncomfortable. Like, I'd rather you just straight up ask me rather than calling me Mr. Merrill.
That's funny. They call you that? Okay. So another thing that, wait, what did you say? I lost my train of thought. Assuming they, them, school. I don't know.
Rather just ask rather than.
We've talked about how like in society, it seems like we've grappled these conversations in like digestible chunks, right? I recall even like sexuality, being gay as like a big taboo conversation when I was growing up, right? And then even the trans conversation 10 years ago, although maybe even more recently, of an understanding of exclusively trans male or trans female, and the concept of still there's only two options. And so if you're trans, then you are either switching from one to the other or vice versa. And so now it feels like even if we've all had an acceptance of those, and people feel like they have grappled with those enough and feel good about it, now we're adding another layer of this. There's more than two. It's not just a binary. Is there room for wiggle room? And it's taking some time, I think. And I would say that I think that's one of the biggest things we recognize at school, or even I'm trying to think of other contexts, but like this weird, like, what do you mean not non-binary? Just a not understanding that there's some diversity there. Who was next?
Patricia was.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to say thank you for doing this and for your bravery, Bryce, in addressing this with the community. You need to be applauded for all of that. Secondly, to go back to the family dynamics, I'm confused or would like direction in how do you refer to your siblings now, Cass? You say you have two sons and one.
So generally,
And the same thing for you, Bryce. If your brothers are saying, I have one brother and one, what is the best way to approach that?
Henry, I've been telling him to refer to me as his sibling. So like if one of my brothers comes out as gender nonconforming in any way or anything, I would say, yeah, I have two younger siblings. And
I feel like we've found ways to like almost avoid gender or like learning new vocabulary. And in fact, in the early days when Bryce first came out to us and they were trying to use our language to help us understand, we were like, what do you mean? And they were like, I would say 60 to 80% of the time I feel female, and 40 to 20%, I don't know. And Dad's like, Justin said, okay, so what if somebody says, tell me about your kids? Am I going to say I have two sons and an 80% girl? Like, what do you mean? We brainstormed gender neutral words. Spawn was a big one. But like, yeah, my offspring, my kid, yeah. You also have a comfortability with Sissa.
Yep, Lincoln specifically, or like you guys with context with Lincoln call me Sissa.
That feels
That's
okay,
fine.
but sister does not sit well with you. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, as society becomes more aware of this, I think it will become easier. But right now we are so drawn into, oh, you have children. What do you have? Do you have girls or boys? And it just, again, just trying to find the sensitive, proper way of doing this. Yeah, thank you.
And I think as, again, as society gets more comfortable, or as we get more comfortable, or you do, in being out in the world, just saying I have, if I want to be specific, I have two sons and a non-binary child or an agender child.
Yeah, just say it like it is. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Jean, you had your hand up and then you took it down.
I didn't want to monopolize, but if others but let me ask, this is a broader, picking up on what Patricia just said. Down the road, culture will change its understanding of pronouns, and I am convinced we will settle on something as a culture that becomes standard and more recognized. I don't know, but I suspect that a new word in the language would be easier for the cultural shift than using a word that we now associate with plural. And my own recognizing that everybody needs to decide for themselves but my choice would be the Z's there with the X,
Yep.
because of the way we have moved with from Latino to Latinx is already in the culture and something that culture is beginning to recognize. So that's a
Interesting.
that's a comment, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It does bring in the neopronouns, and I think over time our society will become more comfortable with neopronouns, and I think that'll be really good for our society. And
it also introduces this concept, again, math nerd, but in calculus, there's something called the indeterminate form. And it's, what does it mean if you take infinity and divide it by infinity? And so this concept of, could there be infinite possibilities between male and female? And if so, if you fit somewhere on that spectrum, are we going to come up with infinite pronouns? And what sits well with one human might not sit well with another human. And so I wonder that too, Jean. I wonder if we will have one option that describes sort of this in-betweenness or gender non-conforming, or are we going to leave room for still to be some variability? If we have one that represents the middle, maybe some people will feel like it doesn't necessarily sit well for them, that maybe they fit somewhere in the feminine half of things. What's half of infinity? I don't know, right? But it definitely introduces that concept too. Yeah, good question. Jacoby Babel.
Again, more of just an observation that Jean circled around on for me. When I was looking at the unicorn, immediately faced with all the choices of where I feel I fit, I felt, okay, I have these choices and now my choices are limited. Or I felt immediately bracketed in, or even though there was some comfort in, okay, that I can maybe go there, or I can choose that. So it's interesting, right? And it's like, without being the infinite possibilities, I guess that, and it's just an observation. That's all. Thank you.
And I've had conversations with adults that feel like, well, aren't we boxing them in a little bit tighter? Like by coming up with all of these options, doesn't it feel like now we're putting them in smaller boxes? And again, it's a calculus problem for me. What is infinity divided by infinity? Is it still infinity? Is it one? Is it nothing? Right? Like it's a tough concept of like not wanting to feel boxed in or labeled as something specific, and also giving room for the infinite possibilities. I see some conversations in the chat. I wonder what the conversation around pronouns looks like in languages that use masculine and feminine words. I also wonder that. I also wonder if there's going to be an evolution of, ooh, Rachel Allen, go.
I can speak to that. So I am a Spanish teacher, and I can tell you, Spanish uses él for he and ella for she, and they are using ella, E-L-L-E, for the gender neutral singular pronoun. So, language does evolve. I think it's, like this is language seems to be something that people hold really tight to, especially, well, we certainly can't use they for a single person, and yet we do that every single day, whether we realize it or not. So, and Spanish is notoriously slow to change. So, it's got an academy that, makes all the choices about it. And that everyone on that academy is white and a man. So, if I see the movement of language, and I think that we are on the road to having a more, I don't know what the word is, but like we're on the road to developing language that can suit many more people than it does right now.
Beautiful. Thank you for that input. Another question. English uses non-specific singular they often. Someone forgot to lock up their bike. Yeah. What I think is hard is specific singular they.
Yeah, so oftentimes you would just like in context, like who's they, and then say the name of the person.
And I noticed too, there's another piece in the chat about somebody's non-binary child that said their classmates are getting better, but that they still often use them incorrectly. And grammatically, there is this piece of like Bampa asking, what would you say if you want your umbrella? And you're like, I want my umbrella. You know, I do think that we're still grappling with wrapping our brains around it. But again, that was my hope in giving that practice sheet too. I think the more we do it and the more we practice it, the easier it will come. Yeah. I'm also just super aware of the time, and we can hang out certainly, but just want to acknowledge that we are over time. And so if anybody has to head out, they can, and we're not offended. Are there other questions?
Can I ask a question? Is that okay, or is there somebody in line?
Go ahead.
I just want to say I'm really. So I have on my caseload as therapist, I have about 10 trans kids currently, and I'd say about half the parents are really accepting, and then the other half the kids are terrified to tell and won't. And so I just wondered if you both can just give like a quick thing that made, you know, something that made it easier for you, Bryce, to be able to talk to Cass. And Cass, was there anything in particular that was helpful in the way that Bryce communicated it? Just so, you know, I'm continuing to support them in this process.
Yeah, so I do have some trans friends who, some of them, their parents are okay with it now. Some of them are, but they weren't when they first came out. Some of them are not okay with it flat out, and some are just totally fine with it. And try to communicate to your kid as best as you can. Like, it is totally fine if you don't identify with how you are told you should and all of that stuff. Like,
it was hard for you to come out though still, and you knowing me, knowing our family,
I knew you would be totally fine with it, but no matter what, there's going to be this little voice in the back of your head that's like fearing the worst, like, oh no, she's not going to accept me. And
do you remember how you came out to me?
Yeah, do you?
No, tell me more.
It was Thanksgiving break. It was the day before Thanksgiving, I think, and I asked Mom if we'd be able to like go on a drive some point during that break, and you said yeah, sure. And then we went up to Cold Hollow and got cider, and like the whole way there and back I was planning on telling you, and I didn't know how, and I was super nervous, and finally I just went for it. And I was like, do you ever think you should say something, but then you keep stopping yourself, but you still really want to say it, but you're not sure if you should? And then you were telling me like, okay, kid, just say it. And then I told you, and you were shocked. You did not expect it.
Yeah.
Especially not from me.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Were you disappointed in my reaction?
No, I wasn't. I knew there would be a minute to process, and there was. It took you a while to process.
Yeah.
But I also knew you were going to be okay with it in the end, even with that tiny voice in the back of your head.
I would say from my perspective, well, there's two things that come to mind. One is that the reality is that the statistics show that violence against trans youth is huge and scary, and keeping kids safe should be the priority, and that's what it was for me. I recall when you told me, I was nervous, and then I recall I was thinking, okay, who do I reach out to? Because I need some expert advice here to like walk me through this, because I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to hurt them in any way. And the pediatrician, I reached out to them, and mental health experts, I reached out and got some advice, and that was helpful to me. I also recognize that it's not safe for some kids to come out to their families or to in other spaces, right? And I think as an educator working with youth, like acknowledging that of it's okay to not come out too, and to not, and I understand that like you really want to encourage everybody to live their truth, and also your experience is that you're safe when you do that, and that's not always true for everybody.
Their truth as best as they can, but also that really mostly applies if you are safe, if you are in a safe place, in a safe household. It can be really difficult for some people sometimes.
If you have a resource cast that helped you when you were getting information that you'd love to share, like any kind of, website that you might have gone to, like I'll send, parents to different sites.
Yeah.
Anything that stood out to you that you'd love to share?
Well, again, I reached out to the pediatrician, and part of that is knowing the pediatrician and knowing her stance on it, and that it would be safe to come out to her. I also recognize that in Vermont, maybe that's more common than like other states or other parts of the world even. So I went to the pediatrician. Outright Vermont is an organization, and are there outrights everywhere? Or is it just Vermont? Yeah. Okay. So Outright is an organization that specifically supports youth in the area, LGBTQ youth. And so I reached out to them. They've been super helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Patricia?
Bryce, I'm wondering how you're emotionally dealing with this now that you have figured out who you are. Are your days easier, or are you still struggling with your feelings? I mean, are you at a place of comfort and peace, or is it a daily struggle?
I think it's a bit of both, because I am still questioning, and I think I always will be. So there always will be like that doubt in my mind of like, what if this isn't right? What if I'm faking it? What if I'm making the whole thing up?
Wow, you really do wonder that.
Yeah. Wow. What if I was just doing it for attention? But I also feel like, why would I do that? How would that benefit me? How would that benefit anyone to be doing it just because?
Can I talk a little bit about mental health?
Yes, but give me a minute. And so I have been lucky enough to be in a family that is accepting and loving. And so I have these moments where it's just pure happiness. A lot of the time, people describe it as gender euphoria or gender dysphoria, and I've experienced both. And so gender euphoria is like just complete happiness surrounding your gender, and it is I don't know how to explain it, but it is one of the best feelings in the world.
Like you feel like you in your skin.
It just feels right. Just something about the world feels right in that moment. And then gender dysphoria is kind of the opposite of that. And like, I just feel trapped in my own body. I can't get out. I need something. Something needs to happen, and it sucks. And luckily, I haven't experienced too much bad dysphoria to some extent, but I have also learned some things that I can do if I'm feeling dysphoric or anything. And sometimes it surrounds like my physical body, and sometimes it surrounds my brain and how people perceive me, anything.
I would say from a parent perspective, I've seen a huge improvement, and In fact, that was one of my gut reactions in the beginning. Like when I'm struggling parenting, like how the heck do I parent this situation? I go back to my foundation is health and safety. So like, how do I make sure my kid's safe? And am I addressing the health and safety needs of my kids? So you described it at first to me was that you were experiencing gender dysphoria. And so I was concerned of like, I want to address both needs. I want to acknowledge that this shift is happening and what can we do to address that. But I also want to acknowledge that if there's some body issues or any sort of mental health component of like, you're not feeling good about yourself, that's alarming too. And I want to address that. And also, again, I've seen this huge shift of like comfortability almost of like, and almost like relief or recognition, like, oh, that's what's been going on these past few years. And like,
that's what that felt like.
Cool,
yeah. Probably, honestly, one of the best days of my life was when we cut all my hair off. Cause like a year ago it was down here. Before that, it was down to my waist.
Forever, you've had long hair forever.
I've always had long hair. I've loved having long hair. I miss it sometimes. But I also feel like short hair is what's right for me. That feels like an accurate representation of who I am, and just feeling that freedom. And I've always had a lot of emotional attachment to my hair, and I'm not entirely sure why or where that's rooted in, but I've always felt it. And so even now, I think I wear hats for like the security of it in replacement of my hair, and I wonder if part of it is like covering my ears, honestly. Just kind of weird, but yeah, so just being able to let go of all the emotional attachment I had to my hair in a healthy way.
I also feel like there's been like not public necessarily, but moments where Bryce has shown up for you, or the first time you saw somebody recognize you in Bryce. And I feel like in writing or emails or like a letter or something, I don't even remember specifically, but I remember you seeing it for the first time,
like written out,
acknowledged from somebody outside of the family. And I remember your face like, whoa, like that's really cool. Happening. That feels good. Yeah. Any other questions?
I just want to appreciate so much to have both of your perspectives shared so openly. It's really so meaningful and so valuable to have both Bryce's perspective as a person going through this, and also Cass, your perspective as a parent navigating that. I just really appreciate that as a parent as well. So thank you both.
Yeah, thank you. That's what we were hoping. We felt like we knew that we knew how to have these conversations together, and we felt like it would benefit other people to see how we interact with each other and hear how we're both dealing with it. So that's great validation. Thank you.
I want to quickly piggyback on that. Not only that, but it's so much. It sounds weird in this context, but it's so much fun to watch you two interact. There's such a great energy and humor and love.
Thank you. They're all right.
I tolerate you sometimes, I guess.
Anything else? Just want to acknowledge, thank you all for coming. This was really great for us. We've talked about doing it in other spaces and more times. And if it felt valuable to you, we'd love to have that feedback, and we definitely consider doing it again. I also went to the RGSA in the middle school and presented it to the kids. I think that there's value in, if you know people that would benefit from the conversation. I think some people are intimidated about coming into this conversation and worried about, like, fearful of what are they going to learn or what are they going to have to talk about. And I think we know how to do it like in an easy way, or to put people at ease. And if you have feedback about wanting to do it again and inviting people that you think would benefit from hearing the conversation, for sure, reach out. And we will also make sure that the slideshow gets to you so that you have access to all the links and all the resources. And Lindley, take it away.
That's it. We're all set.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you for coming.
One more thing, I always encourage people to ask me questions at any time. Any question you ever have, you can just ask me and I'm happy answering. So don't feel like worried that you'll offend me or anything. Just go ahead and ask.
Thank you all.